Most people don't realize just how close St. Louis and Missouri came to falling to the Confederacy during the Civil War. It was actually a miracle it turned out the way it did.
Take a look at this man. This man single-handedly saved the city and state against all odds, defying military orders, cultivating a network of spies, playing mind games with the Confederates, and dressing up as a woman? What the hell?
Let's dive into the most underrated Civil War story of all time. Let's talk about General Nathaniel Lyon, and give this video some love as it's my submission for the TikTok US History Contest. Let's give our city some recognition.
The story starts here at the old St. Louis Arsenal, which sits next to Anheuser-Busch Brewery and is now home to the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. Lyon was posted here at the start of the Civil War as a captain who didn't have much power. St. Louis and Missouri was pretty split during the war. It was a slave state, but the population was split on the side they supported. The Confederacy certainly had a surplus of supporters and soldiers to fight, but the main thing it lacked was effective and up-to-date weaponry. The North had all the rifles and cannons they could need. This made the St. Louis Arsenal an incredibly valuable target to seize. The arsenal held tens of thousands of rifles, hundreds of cannons, and hundreds of thousands of rounds of ammunition. It was the biggest arsenal of weapons in the West at the time.
So they were taking every precaution to secure the arsenal, right? Wrong. They had a problem.
General Herney. He was a roadblock in every step of the way. He ordered the most counterproductive things like having troops stop patrolling the arsenal grounds, even though mobs of Southern supporters would gather outside and protest. Captain Lyon at the time tried to get his approval for more recruitment of soldiers since they were significantly outnumbered, but Herney denied all these requests. Herney was a Union general, yes, but all of his friends and family had ties to the South. He was not only no help, he was hurting the chances of Missouri staying in the Union. Lyon knew Missouri Governor Jackson and General Frost, both Southern supporters, were planning to attack and seize the arsenal. They had set up camp not too far away at modern-day St. Louis University's campus, and they called it Camp Jackson. If the arsenal was seized, it would most certainly start the domino effect of Confederates taking St. Louis and then the rest of Missouri.
So Lyon started playing some mind games.
He couldn't get more recruits, but he wanted to make the Union soldier population look big as a deterrent. For a stretch of time, he would send troops and equipment out of the arsenal one by one in the middle of the night, and by morning have all the troops march back through the streets beating their drums. The Confederates were shocked that the arsenal was consistently getting more reinforcements, so they held off an attack a little longer. Every little thing Lyon tried to do to fortify the arsenal that needed approval, including adding more soldiers, was shut down by Herney. Francis Blair Jr., a Missouri congressman who saw the proactive leadership in Lyon, wrote the War Department asking Herney be removed and Lyon put in charge. They waited patiently for a response. In the meantime, while Confederates in St. Louis were arguing over the right time to attack, Lyon was secretly recruiting German immigrants at their local beer gardens to join his cause.
A direct violation of orders. He could have been arrested.
He gave them all a secret word to use when the time came to join the ranks. That word was Saxton, named after a German captain. Lyon thought it came down to defying orders or having St. Louis fall. When he was asked, what if the major at the arsenal finds out about recruitment? He said, then I will pitch him into the river. Then word came down. Goodbye, Herney. Lyon was in charge. He secretly instructed all who wanted to join come to the arsenal one by one at midnight with the secret word. If he had proclaimed the Union recruitment publicly like he was ordered to, this would tip off the Confederates, and they would immediately attack before Lyon's numbers of soldiers increased. Soon, 2,100 volunteers, 80% being German, with the secret word Saxton, were led into the arsenal, sworn in, and put in their posts. Then they took every fortification measure possible around the perimeter.
Oh, and by the way, one of the volunteers, Adolphus Busch, the founder of Anheuser-Busch,
taking a break from making beer and kicking some Confederate butt. Soon after, Lyon heard from his spies that Confederates out of state had seized a smaller arsenal, and they were sending cannons upriver by boat to be collected in St. Louis.
This was not good. They could defend the arsenal against soldiers, even if outnumbered, but up against cannons, they could blow right through the walls and all the fortifications they put in place.
Lyon had to act quick, and he came up with a plan in two parts. First, get rid of the extra weapons at the arsenal. He loaded up 2 ships, one with a handful of old out-of-date guns. He then leaked that information that the ship was sailing through his spies. The Confederates took the bait and they chased it down and seized it. At the same time, though, the other ship with 25,000 weapons and over 100,000 rounds of ammo sailed safely to Illinois for safekeeping.
This would limit the power of the Confederates if they did actually take over the arsenal.
Part 2. Lyon wanted to catch the Confederates red-handed. He allowed them to collect their stolen cannons from the seized arsenal and bring them back to Camp Jackson. And here's the crazy part. Lyon dressed up as a woman in a big ol' 1800s dress and rides on a carriage through the camp, just to confirm with his eyes that they have obtained the cannons.
This is true.
He hid 2 fully loaded revolvers in that dress, because if he was found out, he would not get out of there alive. He made it back though, and he started drawing up plans to attack Camp Jackson.
Another problem though, General Herney pulled some strings in Washington, D.C., and now he's back on his way to the arsenal to resume power.
They have to act quick again. Early in the morning, they march out and surround Camp Jackson. It is a swift surrender from Camp Jackson because of the surprise attack. No shots were fired. And here's something that has failed to be mentioned in any publication online. Before Lyon could accept the surrender, he hops off his horse and the horse kicks him, knocking knocking him unconscious for 30 minutes. His second-in-command, Sweeney, has to direct the orders of surrender without letting the enemy know Lyon is unconscious. That would have been embarrassing. Lyon comes to, and he marches the captured soldiers and stolen cannons back to the arsenal. But since he was unconscious for so long, causing a delay, a mob of Southern sympathizers gathered around. They threw rocks and trash at Lyon's soldiers, and then someone shot one of Lyon's captains. The soldiers fired back into the crowd, and a bloodbath ensued. 28 civilians were killed, as well as Lyon's captain. This would be known as the Camp Jackson Affair, or the Camp Jackson Massacre, depending on what side of the war you were on. Things got worse when Herney got back. He declared that the Governor Jackson had military power over all the state, and they positioned themselves closer to St. Louis. Congressman Blair used this as an excuse to convince President Lincoln that Herney should be fired, and Lyon should be made a general and put in charge of the Western Army. And that's exactly what Lincoln did. Lyon met with the governor at the Plant House Hotel, which is now this Bank of America skyscraper in downtown St. Louis. After much disagreement in the parley, Lyon said, "Governor, this means war." Lyon then chased Governor Jackson, his Confederate State Army, west and then south to the Arkansas border. But his reign eventually came to an end. The quartermaster at the arsenal was in charge of sending more supplies to them at the southern border, but he refused because he was jealous of Lyon's quick rise to power. This sealed Lyon's fate as he was killed at Wilson's Creek by Springfield as his troops ran out of supplies. They were outnumbered by twice the number of soldiers. During the battle, he was shot in the leg and in the head, but he still got back up on a horse and led the final countercharge. It was then that he was shot in the heart and died. Even though the Confederates held the battlefield at the end of the battle, it was a major win for the Union to keep them at the southern border. He was the first Union general to be killed in the Civil War, but his actions kept the Confederate-sponsored armies out of Missouri for the duration of the war.
He was seen by so many as an intelligent and powerful leader. It's been said that had he lived through the rest of the Civil War, he would have went down in history as the most famous Civil War general over Ulysses S. Grant. It also begs the question, could he have become president instead of Ulysses S. Grant? Thank you for watching to the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed this history lesson as much as I did. Please give me a like to help out for my submission for the TikTok US History Contest, and give me a follow on my page if you want to see some more St. Louis content.